So in front of me here, I have a pocket knife that I didn't know existed until I was spending some time on blade forums. And I heard people talking about Buck Stockmans, and somebody brought up the 700 series, which is something that I had never heard of. I think they stopped making them in the early 2000s, something like that. But from what I understand, this was Buck's first attempt at producing a Stockman knife themselves. Now, that being said, the Buck 301 and the 303 and the 371 or 307? 307. 371 is a Chinese made knife, I think. The 307. The 301, the 303, and the 307 are all Buck Stockmans, but I think they were made by Camillus, and then later Buck started making the 303 and the 301 themselves. I don't think they ever made the 307 themselves. Because that's a really large knife and everything. So Buck started making them knives themselves, I think, after Camillus went out of business in 2007 ish, just because I don't know if that's the exact year or not. Um, but from what I understand, this was the first attempt at Buck making a Stockman themselves. These knives, these 700 series. There's a smaller one, which is what this one is, and a larger one. Which honestly, I'd love to have the larger one, but they're a little bit harder to find, as you might imagine. But this is the Buck. I think this is the 703. Is that what this is? Yeah. So this is the Buck 703 Stockman. You got three blades, clip point, which the action on it's really good. I think it's hitting the back spring a little bit there. I'm going to have to do something about that, I think, probably. But the action on that main clip blade is really good. It's a little bit of a funky looking clip blade. These are in 420 HC as far as I'm aware. Um, Buck Buck really likes to use that 420 HC, and it's a fine steel and everything with the heat treat that Buck does. It's good steel, certainly good enough anyway. So you get your clip blade, you get a sheep's foot blade. Yeah, good looking sheep's foot blade with good action, and you got a spade blade here, which again has really good action. Usually on a Stockman, one of the knives opens a little lazy. This one doesn't have that problem. The spade blade is an interesting shape. It kind of tapers down, which isn't really a traditional spade blade shape, so that's a little interesting. But let me show you something else here. Just like Buck's made the 301s and the 303s that Buck makes, this knife has three back springs. So each blade has its own back spring, which is always cool, which makes it a little bit easier to not have blade rub. And you can, I feel like it probably makes the production process a lot easier because you don't have to, kink blades out of the way of each other. You just set them in their spot and go for it. As long as they're, somewhat centered, you should be fine. Um, and you can do a little bit longer blades and you don't have to worry about bending them out of the way of each other and everything. And I feel like it probably just makes the production process a little bit easier. This does have a shield on it that says Buck. You can see right there. I think it's probably just glued in, most likely. I'm not sure what year this knife was made. Those of you that are good at Buck date codes, does it have a thing? It does have a thing. It's got a little dash. So those of you who are good at Buck date codes, leave your comment down there and let me know what year this is. Let everybody else know what year this is, because I don't know. I'm not good with Buck date codes. Not something I ever really cared about. I'm not a Buck knife collector. I buy their knives, the 112, because I like it, and it's a really good knife. And, for the most part, they produce a good product for an affordable price. That's why I buy Buck. I don't buy Buck to collect them or anything, but there are certainly Buck collectors out there. But yeah, this is a knife that I didn't know about, and I'd venture to guess some of you maybe don't know about it either. And I just thought it was interesting because the frame of it looks like, a standard Buck like lockback knife almost, but then it's a Stockman. It's just a really interesting looking knife. I think it looks really interesting because, like I said, the frame looks like the frame on like what is that called? The like 501 or something. I'm not sure. The knife is like three and 3.25 inches closed. So it's about that size frame. The frame looks like a small Buck lockback frame, pretty much, because that's what Buck was used to making, pretty much. It's got some sort of wooden handles. I'm not sure what kind of wooden handles. They kind of look like rosewood. Um, some sort of logo laser etched into the wood. My guess would be that these knives were ordered by some corporation, some company or something. They had their logo laser etched into the wood and gave them to their employees for, like, I don't know, Christmas or some sort of achievement award or something. You know how companies are back in the day. There was a lot of company advertising knives, a lot of company knives where you'd do something like this and then give them to your employees. Back in the day, of course, they don't do that anymore because knives are now seen as obscene weapons for some reason, and it's no longer something that everybody needs. It's now a weapon of war, to use the words of politicians, probably. Although here in America, we get lucky because everybody's so worried about guns that a lot of times they're not that worried about pocket knives. I wish they'd stop worrying about everything so much and start worrying about not spending all of our money to turn people that none of us know into mist. But that's a topic for another day. The fact that our government's constantly spending all of our money to support the military industrial complex, funnel all of our money into giant corporations which make all their money off of war. Don't really like that. Wish they'd spend the money on something more important. And I always think it's funny because anytime that topics like healthcare or anytime you want to help out the American population, somebody always brings up, well, how are you going to pay for that? But then once it comes to war, money suddenly doesn't matter anymore, and we seemingly just make up the idea of money because when it comes to the government and their spending on war, the price doesn't matter. Um, but I'm done with my little hippie anti-war speech there. I feel like most people understand what war is at this point. There are still some people out there that I don't think quite understand yet. But I've noticed even in like conservative circles, like even like most conservatives and most Democrats, I think pretty much agree that we shouldn't be constantly spending all of our money on war, but then they can't agree what we should spend it on instead, so that we just spend it on war. Um, Most Democrat and Republican voters is who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the politicians themselves. They love war because they don't have to go die in it. Um, I really do go off on rants in all these videos. Anyway, Buck 703, cute little Stockman, really interesting design. 420 HC steel, as far as I'm aware. I got this on eBay. You can find these 703s on eBay for, I think I spent like $30 on this, which, I mean, as far as I can tell, the knife's never really been used. So, I mean, $30 for, a nice little Stockman knife. That's a pretty good deal as far as I'm concerned. Um, so, like I said, you can find these on eBay pretty reasonably. If you don't feel like shelling out the money to buy a brand new Buck 301 or 303, maybe look for a 703 on eBay and save a little bit of money. You still get an American-made Buck Stockman. That was weird. I'm gonna guess that my phone is going to do that in the recording. It's the government. They know what I said. Now they're shutting down my phone. Uh, Anyway, that's going to be it for this video on the Buck 703 Stockman and the military industrial complex, as I understand it, as a 30-year-old man living in Pennsylvania who never was in the military. Um, but anyway, that's going to be it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one, and I hope you have a good day.